So, folks, my name's Stephanie, and I have the pleasure of working at Climbing the Seven Summits. We're really thankful to have Rebecca Dent joining us, and she is a wonderful nutritionist, and she's going to give you lots of information today about how to fuel yourself and also really prepare and plan and be ready. Rebecca, would you mind giving yourself a quick introduction to the wonderful folks that are here today?
Hi there. Thanks for having me. I'm Rebecca. I'm a high-performance dietitian. I've been a dietitian for over 20 years and specialize in working with ultra endurance, so ultra runners and mountain sport athletes. It's my passion and I really love what I do. I've had a big background in terms of my working experience. I've worked in the NHS and specialized in weight management, and I worked and continue to work with recreational athletes to the elite competitive athlete and Olympic athletes. I'm based in Chamonix in the French Alps. I'm married to a IFMG, a mountain guide, and I love being in the mountains and being outside. I ski tour, ski mountaineer in the winter and do all sports in the summer, trail run, bike, alpine climb. So I really get it. I really get the position everyone puts themselves into in terms of training towards country mountaineering trip, whether it's hiking through to mountaineering, through to FKTs. I really understand both the nutritional requirements, the physiological requirements, and understanding the positions that you're in and the practical aspects that influence nutrition. My previous experience, I was over at Uphill Athlete for about 5 years working as a nutritionist supporting uphill athletes. And I've worked with over 200 uphill athletes and more of my own private clients, supporting people with nutrition and hydration strategies towards backcountry or big mountain goals such as Mont Blanc, Matterhorn, whether it's ski mountaineering, ski touring, single days, hut to hut. Those of us who want to climb the 8,000 meter peaks, whether it's Denali, Vincent, Everest, really help people lay out nutrition strategies to get the most out of their day and increase chances of summit success. So whether it's 14ers, Mount Rainier, Mount Baker, Ptarmigan Traverse, some of the 6,000 meter peaks, whether we go to Ecuador, Kilimanjaro. And like I said, a lot of people I support also just really want nutrition and hydration advice to help get the most out of the mountain days or the backcountry that you go into, because it's something you do on a regular basis. So yeah, a huge variety in terms of mountains, altitudes, ultra runners, ultra running races, through hiking, fast packing days. There's lots of learning and understanding I've gained from all of that.
Awesome. So let's talk about those learnings. I'm sure you've seen some successes in the mountains, and I'm sure you've seen some missteps as well. Those missteps, what are you seeing that people are most commonly not quite hitting the mark on when they're in the backcountry?
The biggest thing that I see that would probably benefit every single person to do would be that most people, if not everyone I've supported, don't plan or practice enough. Some people might plan, some people may practice, but don't plan or practice your nutrition and hydration strategy enough going towards your trip, your day, your mountain objective. So that's the biggest one, and that's the one that can have the biggest positive influence on the outcome of your day, of your trip. Many people as well often forget to eat and drink when you go on your adventure. You go out into the mountains, whether we get distracted or whether it's because we're just not habituated to eat and drink, whether we just stuff it in our packs at the bottom so don't have ease of access to it, then it becomes a faff and we don't think about it. Some of us tend to find sometimes it's a test of fitness. I'm going to see how long I can go without needing to eat. That's something I would discourage. Others can get into a way of, I'm going to wait till I'm hungry and thirsty until I start eating and drinking. I don't need to eat and drink until I have that feeling of hunger, until I start to feel thirsty. Others just try to grab and go. Maybe we haven't planned, we haven't organized, or we've run out of supplies at home. So we're raiding the kitchen cupboards and pulling everything out that we think we can take with us, or we're dashing around the supermarket in the last minute, taking things that we think are going to be suitable. The other common mistake I see is primarily focusing on calories. We tend to get 4,000 calories a day, 200 to 400 calories per hour. And that can be helpful. But again, it's not really the best way to go in terms of planning out a nutrition and hydration strategy that's really going to work for you, to give you more energy, to give you more confidence that it's going to work for you on your trip and really helping you get the most out of that day.
That's wonderful. Planning really does seem to be the key, but I also suspect that somebody's nutrition needs actually vary quite a bit between what they're doing and also who they are as a person. Like, I can't just copy my friend's plan for Aconcagua because they did it and that's what worked for them for food. Is that true that it varies depending on the person and where they're going, their nutrition needs?
Yeah, the style of the trip or the day that you're going on has a huge influence on your nutrition strategy. We've already seen people doing Denali, Everest, Kilimanjaro, Mont Blanc. Someone was doing a long distance cycle. These will all have a big influence on the nutrition strategy and will certainly be different. Although Denali may be 5,500 meters and Kilimanjaro is 6,000 meters, the nutrition strategies for those are both completely different. Denali, you're pulling a sledge, you're caching, where Kilimanjaro is more of a steadier hike, for want of a better word, without removing away the challenge of it. So they're two completely different styles in terms of the technical ability and the effort required. And that's the same when it comes to climbing, mountaineering, hiking. I know we've got a couple of questions on doing the Tour de Mont Blanc or climbing Mont Blanc. So again, it depends on the style of the day, the altitude, the weather, the environment, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, whether it's dry and dusty, whether it's a technical trail, and then the technical ability, the skill level required to go on this trip, along with access to foods and fluids, whether it's supported or self-supported, and the ability of the weight or the amount of food that you can carry. So that all has a play into developing the nutrition and hydration strategy.
That sure is a lot of factors. And many of you asked specifically, what about Denali? What about Aconcagua? I do want to make you aware that I saw that, but we saved those so we don't get too far down a rabbit hole. I put all those questions at the end, just depending on time, if Rebecca can share some tips on that. I want to show you really quickly. This is actually posted by a Climb the Seven Summits client and also a climber that works with Rebecca as well. Her name's Julie. This is Julie, right?
Yeah, this was her. We really walked through her nutrition strategy. As you can see, a nutrition strategy there with all highlighter over, and she did an amazing job of pulling it together for her second attempt at Denali.
Yeah, this was her second attempt at Denali. I'll play it one more time. So I love the little spreadsheet right there. You can see that note spreadsheet with highlights on it. And that's really what a plan looks like. It's going to be on paper. It's going to be in front of you. You're going to have all these boxes and things going on. Before we jump into quite a few questions that I have from folks here in the audience today, I want you to go through your plan, and then I also want to talk a little bit about recovery after that. Rebecca, I'll turn it back over to you to go through your top nutrition tips and how you really set up a plan.
The goal for everybody is really to help manage your energy levels on a day-to-day basis, whether it's a single day outing or whether it's a multi-day back-to-back big mountain days. You really want to look at managing your energy levels on a day-to-day basis and offsetting significant dehydration. The thing is, we're not going to be able to eat enough to meet our daily energy requirements and our hydration needs whilst we're moving. So whilst we're actually mountaineering, climbing, running, cycling, that's not the goal, to meet your energy requirements that you're burning whilst you're moving, or try and maintain hydration. We really want to optimize our nutrition and hydration strategy for the environment and the style of the trip. So the idea is, when you start to make your plan, really to determine your daily moving time per hour. So looking at maybe your trip itinerary or what your day is going to look like, and estimating and getting an idea of how long you're going to be moving for. So exercising, moving in the mountains on a day-to-day basis. And that's going to be the basis of your plan. And then thinking about calories are king. I know I mentioned before, not just to solely focus on calories, but in some instances at higher altitudes or on multi-day trips, you really want to try and get the calories in. So when we're looking at doing a nutrition and hydration strategy for moving time, so for however many hours you're going to be moving through the mountains or cycling or whatever you're going to be doing, you do want to focus on choosing carbohydrate-based snacks. And I'm going to give you loads of examples of what they are. But again, they're going to be your primary fuel sources, the foods that are going to give you the energy to move, to perform well whilst you're moving in your backcountry trip or the mountain day. And for those of you that are doing long distance cycling, the Tour de Mont Blanc, back-to-back days, if you're out for a long period of time during the day, maybe not moving as fast as running, or it's more practical to do so, then you can start to think about adding in foods that contain fats and proteins. Fats for the additional calories, protein for both the recovery on a day-to-day basis and also protein and fats for a mix of flavors. Because if we do just rely on carbs, then often it tends to be a sweet option. So the fats and proteins can also bring in calories, help us recover on a day-to-day basis, and also a change in flavor. And then the other key thing is when you're looking at putting your plan together for moving time, which is what I really want to emphasize in this webinar today, that many people don't do, is then really looking at getting energy from lots of different places. So if we're just drinking water, I would always recommend to add a sports drink to at least one of the Nalgene's or soft flasks. The idea behind a sports drink is, again, providing you with additional source of energy, but then also research has shown that actually if you're adding a sports drink, we're going to be absorbing more of that fluid than compared to drinking water alone. And this is particularly important if our access to foods and fluids is limited, and will also help offset that significant dehydration. That's the main principle for starting to plan out your nutrition and hydration strategy for your day, determining hourly moving time.
And I know, Rebecca, this is our only slide on recovery. Can you speak a little bit more about the importance of a recovery snack bar or a shake and why it can really make a difference when you're out there for many days in a row?
Yeah, in this webinar, I'm just covering moving time. So that time that you're spending being active in the mountains. Often we think about breakfast, evening meals, and what we're going to eat or where we're going to get it from. What often is missed is looking at that moving time strategy and then adding in the recovery straight after, whether that's a recovery shake, a protein bar, something that's going to help kickstart the recovery process straight away, particularly if you're going back out for another big day the following day. So often what I found is that if we finished a big day and whether we're set straight into camp, setting up camp, back to our accommodation in a hut, in a refuge, we may get distracted by what's going on around us, or we just want to derobe, organize our kit, have a shower if that's available, and get ready for the next day. But what I encourage people to do is think recovery first. Often the easiest option is a recovery shake so that you can just simply add it to water. The beauty of that is that it helps you to rehydrate, it helps give you a source of energy, and it helps start the recovery process straight away. So that's really important to tag on planning at the end of your nutrition and hydration for moving time.
On the flip side of that, I know we're going to focus today pretty much on moving time and really strategies around making that plan. But one question that came in from Aaron K has to do with the beforehand time period. About how far out should you start practicing your plan for an expedition? Is it you give yourself a month, 2 months, 6 months? Is there an easy recommendation? It might be variable. I recognize that too.
It's a great question. As far out as you can, 6 months, 3 months, 12 months. When I start to work with people on a one-to-one basis, I'll always ask them, how far away is your trip? You know, the least amount of time would be a month out, just to be able to put together your nutrition strategy and then practice that in your long runs, your long hikes, or your smaller mountain days, backcountry trips. So really you can both test the nutrition products to make sure you like them, getting to the habit of eating regularly, hydrating, and also training your stomach to get used to eating on the go. And that's what's really important, because we've got to put our stomach to the test and help it get used to eating whilst we're moving and whilst we're on the go. If you can put your nutrition strategy together well in advance and just practice that as often as you can in your either long runs, long hikes, or your kind of smaller objectives that you're doing to then help you move towards your big trip. I would help someone plan that out specifically and then target new specific sessions or days to really then go and test out that strategy. But once is not enough. It needs to be over and over and over and over and over and over again until you're confident that it works for you.
Thank you for that, Erin. Great question. And then 2 more questions came in from Jenny and from Ed. They ask, do you generally adjust this any for women and or for older athletes? So it might be an older woman, maybe going through menopause, maybe also just managing their period, something like that. Do we adjust this for women? And have you seen any adjustments for older athletes as well?
Yeah, good questions. All of the adjustments I would probably make for someone who is an older athlete or a female would be done in training and day-to-day nutrition. That's where, for me, the biggest gains and the biggest difference are seen in nutritional requirements for those of us who are getting older, and for women through the life stages. When it comes to actually planning nutrition for the main event, then there isn't a huge difference in terms of nutritional needs. There isn't really much research to look at in terms of the differences between men and women physiologically and the aging athlete when we go into the mountains or when we go into the backcountry. So at the moment, there isn't anything to show that women need this that's different to a male, and older athletes need this that's different. It tends to be because the idea is to optimize energy levels and offset significant dehydration. It's kind of a standard process I would use for everybody, and the differences would potentially come when we're looking at day-to-day and training. The main things I would say for men and women going into the mountains is to really do some strength training, and that will make a big difference to women. Somebody asked about carrying a weighted pack, and I think being stronger, doing regular strength training is really going to support that and support us as we go into the mountains, and we are going to touch on that as well.
Rebecca, you keep referencing moving time, and I know today our big focus is moving time. But I also noticed that you're not using, if you hike 6 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles, if you have this much elevation gain. I want to dive into understanding why you, and even Climb the 7 Summits, we use that terminology a lot versus mileage. Why you focus on moving time versus mileage?
For me, it just makes sense because it's just so much easier to determine a nutrition and hydration strategy when you're looking at how long you're actually going to be exercising and be moving. The kilometers become irrelevant in the sense you could be out for 3 hours or you could be out for 7 hours, and you could be covering the same amount of distance, but it depends on the ascent that you're doing. The style of your trip is going to have a greater influence on the nutritional strategy than actually looking at kilometers. And even if I'm working with ultra runners or runners, I'm still asking them, they'll say, I'm just out to go and do a 10K training session. I'll be like, well, how long is that going to take you? Because that will still influence the nutrition strategy more by how long they take to do that session as opposed to looking at the distance.
Awesome. So can you walk us through your recommendations when somebody's out moving in the mountains? What do you recommend? A lot of this is based per hour or while you're out in the field.
This is really generalized. If I'm working with someone on a one-to-one basis, we'll look at the style of the trip, access to foods and fluids, whether it's supported, self-supported, how much you're able to carry with you, where are you going to be able to top up supplies. I'm also looking at the technical aspect of that and the terrain that you're going to be moving through during that day. So this general premise where I start with everyone in terms of putting together a nutrition and hydration strategy is thinking about adding in 1 snack per hour of moving time, primarily a carbohydrate-based snack, and then looking at 1 Nalgene, whether it's 750 ml, 1 litre with a sports drink, 1 Nalgene, then with water, sports drink, or an electrolyte as preferred. And often the mistake people make is actually the electrolyte is just salt, so it tends to be sodium, potassium, and magnesium and doesn't contain any energy. The sports drink will contain energy and you'll need to double check, but most often electrolytes as well. So whether a Nalgene with water, sometimes people just want water because often if we're primarily relying on carbohydrate, foods and fluids, they tend to be sweet. So again, water in terms of a change in flavour, or adding another sports drink, some people are okay with that, or electrolytes as preferred. We'll also come on to other liquid options that can be used in terms of liquid calories, or if our appetite is poor, or if we're moving higher up the mountain. And then some people choose to take, if it's cold, or if they just want an extra source of fluid, 500 ml soft flasks with coffee, hot chocolate, water, or a sports drink. Often I would recommend taking a soft flask because you can tuck it into your jacket, and then in opportune breaks, when you do stop, you can then top up your soft flask from the Nalgene and then keep sipping on it. The practicality and the ease of that, and remembering to drink. And then 1 protein bar for the middle of the day, lunchtime. If you can, I would always recommend to take a sandwich or a wrap with. So again, if it's just day hits, general days going into the mountain, your first day doing the Matterhorn or Mont Blanc. The Matterhorn is just a 1-day push, but if you can take a sandwich with you, we always feel better when we have something a bit more substantial that will boost energy levels, boost our motivation, boost our mood. So if you can't do that, then I would always suggest taking a protein bar or a protein and carbohydrate bar for the middle of the day, the lunchtime, in terms of getting that protein in for that recovery process on a day-to-day basis. Jellies or chews, just in terms of if you feel like you're running out of energy before you're going up a steep ascent or a technical climb, or if you're just feeling like you need a boost, then these are ideal to take with you. That can also be a gel, and we'll talk around the use of different types of products and foods later on. And then somebody else mentioned a Snickers bar actually in the chat, that they said they always work best. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree, in the sense of it's always great to take with you an extra item or an extra couple of items, depending on your weight allowance, of these foods that just give us a psychological boost. If all else fails, you definitely want to take something with you that you know will go down. You know, if you get stuck, or if you're chasing for a last lift, or if the day's taking you longer than expected, then it's always great to have these items that you can eat, that you know if you like the taste of, and it's just going to give you a real mental boost as well.
I know these are general recommendations, but I also know that when we're in the mountains, sometimes things aren't always going on schedule. Like, oh, I could stop and have my hour snack right now as I'm summiting Aconcagua or Mont Blanc. So what do you recommend? I'm sure it's variable, but what do you recommend? What do you advise folks once they're really in the thick of it? They're out on the mountain. How does that work?
That's the whole idea. If we have a plan, and a plan that we've practiced, we're going to follow that plan and eat and drink more than we would have done if we didn't have a plan whatsoever. I'm absolutely aware, and I know it's not necessarily always practical to eat once in every hour, to stop and eat once in every hour. And I'm certainly not suggesting that everyone stops to eat once in every hour. Some guided trips they plan in where safe and where natural breaks, will stop for 5 minutes in every hour, again, depending on the style of the trip that you're on. Other people, I would certainly encourage to eat whilst moving. So make sure that you have things in easy to reach pockets, and that you are used to eating on the go and used to drinking on the go. And the idea of this general outline and strategy is, what I want everybody to do is sip little and often, eat little and often. So that doesn't necessarily mean rigidly on the hour, but it's just to give everybody a guide of what to take with you. And when it comes to working with people on an individual basis, I will actually go and we will walk through every single day, looking at the style of the day, the technical ability, and where there will be times that you just can't eat. And it's just really accounting for that.
From the Climbing 7 Summit side, that's really what we love so much, is that one-to-one support you offer. Rebecca's going to go through, not just day by day, but literally like, oh, okay, your summit push is approximately this long. This is what you need to do. This is what you should eat ahead of time that night. Here's how you're going to eat in the morning. So when you don't eat for 4, 5, 6 hours, or you're just having little bits here and there, you're still going to feel as good as you can in that moment. I know we're moving on to our next one on loss of appetite. Do you want to jump in and say anything else here?
Yeah, if you're planning your moving time per hour, often people will say to me, oh, that's quite a lot of snacks. And I do work back through some of the days after people have put them into practice or done maybe smaller objectives that they're using to train towards the bigger objective. And we can scale it back if it needs to be. If you're looking at 1 snack per hour of moving time, often I will not include the first hour and the last hour of the day. So the first hour, you've often not long had breakfast or had a pre-day snack. So then you can miss the first hour. And then maybe the second hour, that's where you have the jellies or the chews the hour before. And that's enough to see you through to the end of the hour. So there's different ways that you can work with this strategy to still really help make sure you're getting enough, not feel like you're overloaded. In terms of weight, often it's said 1 pound per day for snacks for moving time if it's a supported trip. If it's an unsupported trip, it's 2 pounds per day for snacks and meals, in terms of anybody wants kind of a guideline in weight suggestions. But again, I really would encourage people to get used to trying out this nutrition strategy, even if it feels like a lot or more than what you're usually carrying. The benefit of having more energy, the benefit of offsetting significant dehydration will make you feel better, will increase your chances of summit success, and will go a long way towards the enjoyment of your day and you getting more out of that day.
Thank you for the advice on the 2 pounds. That's a really nice general guideline. Just thinking through my own trips coming up, I'm like, oh, I am bringing 10 pounds of food for a 5-day trip. But most important is it's practical. You're going to work with people to make practical decisions, not be like, here's 17 bars for this one singular day because you're out for that long.
And I work with people. I don't tell people what to do. You know, we all have good knowledge in nutrition. Many people already have good nutrition and hydration plans that they take with them, or, you know, have a good idea of what they know works for them in terms of the types of bars or foods or gels or chews they take with you. So it's always a collaboration and agreeing, testing it out and making those adjustments together.
So I know that when you're at altitude and just really moving in the mountains, lots of things happen to your appetite, to how you're feeling. So let's jump into losing your appetite, and we'll also talk about considerations for altitude.
Yeah, there's different reasons why we lose our appetite. You know, one of them is the higher we go up in altitudes, we do lose our appetite. The other reasons are if we are doing significant amount of activity, we can often lose our appetite because some people find that just by going out and being active and moving for extended periods of time during the day, we tend to find we just don't feel like eating. The other reasons why we might not have an appetite is those alpine starts. We're just waking up too early in the morning or in the middle of the night, you know, midnight starts to then, you know, do the summit push. And so often then we are kind of experiencing the poor appetite. So what can we do about it? I mean, often people will say to me, oh, you know, I just don't feel like eating. I just don't fancy anything. And kind of over the years, I've gone, well, maybe we just need to find something that will go down, practice eating and drinking when we're not hungry. We need to override that feeling of desire of food or that encouragement of, oh, that looks nice or that smells good. You know, we need to override our senses and be able to eat and drink when we don't feel hungry. I'm not suggesting that we eat or drink things that are going to make us sick or going to make us feel nauseous or put us off eating for the rest of the duration of that day. What I really want to encourage people to do is just practice with different variety of things, trying to get things down when you don't feel hungry and find out what will go down. It's different for everybody, whether that's liquid calories, whether that's a gel, whether it's some sweets, whether it's a bar that will just slide down, doesn't require much effort to chew. It's really different for everybody. And you do almost need to become robotic about this. I've spoke to people when they've come back from trips. I think this one was Broad Peak, and someone said, oh, you know, I didn't eat very much because the food wasn't like I've eaten back home. And I'm like, well, it's not going to be. So the idea is find out about the foods that you're going to get on the trip, if it's a supported trip, and just recreate those. Be familiar with it, understand what it tastes like, what it smells like, and get used to eating these things. We can train our stomach to get used to eating, obviously, unfamiliar foods and make them familiar. So we're really increasing our chances of being able to get things down. In terms of liquid calorie options, for people who I've supported with in terms of alpine starts, there's different options. You could just have hot chocolate that might be available. You could have the sports drink or make it hot if you want something warm at that time. People have used tea with honey and ginger, something with some calories in. Or you can go down more of the specific kind of meal replacement route. Things like Huel or Hammer Perpetua are kind of two of the popular ones. And also the other one that's quite a popular one is the Tailwind Recovery Shake that's got a really good nutrition profile, not dissimilar to the Perpetuum, potentially better actually in terms of just using that something to drink for your alpine starts or when you've lost your appetite. So again, you can just sip on that on a regular basis. But we really need to try and practice and becoming robotic about this and just really experimenting and finding things that will go down for you.
So one question that came in, somebody anonymously asked, those with a sensitive digestive system, those who kind of get a sour stomach, maybe have IBS, things like that, I suppose it's practice to get yourself ready. Any other tips for them?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a bit more than that. So there's two different categories there. It's if we tend to find we have stomach issues that aren't related to things like IBS, intolerances, allergies, then if it's just a separate stomach issue, that can be trained. We can get used to getting things on board whilst we're moving. And often when it's just stomach related due to eating, because we're not used to it. That can be resolved when practiced in training, practiced away from the trip. And it is a case of practice, practice, practice. You do it strategically. So I'm not asking people to force themselves to eat, but there's a way of doing it in training by eating little and often throughout the session so that you can just train your gut. We've seen the science to show that you can train your gut and get used to eating on the go and eating more or drinking more fluid. There's different strategies to help with that. When it comes to actually IBS, maybe medical health related stomach issues, they can be addressed issues that are a little less harsh on the stomach, or different types of carbohydrate that don't tend to create those stomach issues that we may find in people who have IBS or have stomach issues related to stress or intolerances. And again, potentially a probiotic, taking that well in advance of your trip. Often people take a probiotic for a week and go, oh, it didn't work. And I'm like, you need to stay on them for at least 6 to 8 weeks for them to take effect. So definitely a probiotic. And then also potentially a digestive enzyme could help. So taking the digestive enzyme before a meal can potentially help with stomach issues when you go away. So there's different solutions. And again, I would really drill down and problem solve both around stomach issues that are just related to eating and training and exercise, and then stomach issues that are related to kind of more medical health related aspects like intolerances, IBS, general irregular bowel habits.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you for also clarifying the really two separate categories. Yes. On the flip side of that, people oftentimes say, well, I'm going to gain some weight, so when I lose my appetite and I'm on the mountain, it's going to be a little bit easier. What are your thoughts on gaining weight to help with the loss of altitude or with the expected weight loss? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, another really common question. People are like, do I need to gain weight before I go on my trip? And I'm like, well, it depends. Often if we're going into the mountains, maybe Antarctica, and pulling a sled, there may be reasons there for people to gain weight because you're going to be burning a lot of calories, and over an extended period of time, you'll be losing weight that will be detrimental to your performance. But when you go into the mountains, if people say, oh, do I need to gain weight? If people are generally carrying extra weight and maybe a little bit overweight, then I would say no. You need to focus on training and being fit for your objective. And if you do that and dial in your day-to-day nutrition and nutrition for training, you'll find your body composition will naturally change and adjust. You don't need to gain weight specifically if you're doing Everest or going on these big expeditions. However, if you're going into the mountains, if you're already lean and you can't really afford to lose weight because then you'll be underweight, loss of muscle mass, impair body fat levels, and then maybe increase your chances of sickness, poor recovery, low energy. So you can't really afford to lose any weight because you may be on the leaner side because you're athletic and fit. Then potentially it may be a good idea for these people to gain weight. But the idea isn't to eat what you want and eat highly processed junk food. The idea is I would help someone 3 months out and really help gain muscle mass and some body fat strategically and nutritiously. So whether that's adding more helpful fats, whether it's kind of increasing calories at meals, whether it's adding in between meal snacks that are supporting training and preparation and not just making us feel unhealthy and kind of bloated to start on our trip. We don't necessarily need to gain weight before a trip. The idea is to offset significant weight loss, which is where the moving time nutrition plan will go a long way into helping you do that. I supported Julie there, who went to Denali. Her first trip, she lost 20 pounds when she tried to summit Denali. The next time she went with a nutrition plan that I helped provide her, she lost 9 pounds. You know, and that's a huge difference in weight change. I had another client and he did a 50-day mountaineering trip. The first time he did that, he lost 14 pounds. The next time he went on a similar trip, he lost 5 pounds because I helped him with a specific nutrition strategy. And he had dairy intolerance. He was gluten-free and had an allergy to sunflower oil. So again, you can create nutrition strategies for whatever kind of dietary requirements that we have that then all fit into that moving time strategy. So it does really help go a long way to offsetting significant dehydration. So if someone says to me, do I need to gain weight for a trip? I like, well, have you got a nutrition strategy for moving time? And most of the time people lose weight because we don't necessarily have a nutrition strategy for that time that we're spending moving. And that can make the biggest difference. So again, it's individual style of the trip, but that's the general premise.
Well, Rebecca, we're going to switch gears a little bit. I want to move away from this plan and what to expect and how to work with that moving time to actually those real food and sport food recommendations that are coming directly from Rebecca. This one is going to be all about real food. And let's jump into the nuts and the bolts of actually eating and drinking and fueling yourself and what you recommend.
I mean, in short, whatever trip you tend to go on, in general, it will be both a mix of sports products and real food. So ideally, taking a sports drink to add into your Nalgene soft flask, taking a sandwich along with you for those day trips if you can. And then if you're going to altitude, Everest, Denali, Vincent, you certainly want to be taking some of these familiar foods with you, maybe to eat as snacks once at camp, or maybe if there is the opportunity to have them whilst you're moving, depending on the stage, the altitude that you're at and the style of that section of moving time. But yes, so it's going to be different. It's going to be a mix of familiar foods, carbohydrate-based foods, and sports products. Some of these options here aren't necessarily carbohydrate rich. You'll see the Beach Sticks bars are protein heavy, and that's when it does come back to calories are king. So if you are experiencing a lack of appetite, poor appetite, and those are the only thing that you think are going to go down because you want something savory, then I'd be like, great, then have it. Something is better than nothing. And then maybe if you can, wash it down with some sports drink. That's the idea, is setting out your nutrition strategy with a mix of these options.
And when we're thinking on the real food, a couple of people asked, they're vegans or vegetarians. Meat sticks, I know, are a huge piece of my diet when I go out in the backcountry for multiple days. And I get a little tired of peanut butter and nuts. So any other suggestions for, especially on the real food front, for those vegan and vegetarian folks to help replace a few of those items and get that protein they need?
You can get, I'm not sure how palatable they are, you can get some tofu sticks, can't you, and some plant-based ones, but it's, again, just a matter of crackers, and most of the energy bars are kind of oat, seed, nut-based, and you can get a great variety of those. So it's just really having a look at the options, the vegan, vegetarian, plant-based options that are out there, and just really practicing them. Most of this list on here is vegan, vegetarian, and then it's looking at the bars that you take with you. So it's just part of planning that out. Whether you're a supported or a self-supported trip, I'd often work with that person to find out what's available at refuges, what they're being provided, or what they're taking with them to then take additional options. So the person I was talking to before, who he did the 50-day trip, who was gluten-free, although he went on a supported trip, I encouraged him to take some additional freeze-dried meals, and it was lucky that he did, because the options he was given were options he either didn't like or weren't suitable. So then he was able to supplement with what he took. Just going back on the sports products, familiar foods, I know someone's doing a Tour de Mont Blanc. It's those opportunities where you can take more of the solid foods if you're hiking, moving maybe similar altitudes, or taking more of your time, or you're not pressured by the environment that you're in the sense of you don't have to get to this place and this place before it gets dark, or if the weather's coming in, or it's the time of day that you're moving at because of safety. Then actually, if you do have a bit more time to spend, then I would suggest to take a mix of the real food options and try to have those, like the bars, dried fruits, solid foods, and then add in the sports products on top of it.
That's really great advice there. Thank you for really clarifying those long haul backpacking trips, or when you're out for many, many days in a row, really focusing on a mix of things, because you don't have to have as much. It sounds like not as much sports food is going to be as needed.
It's all dictated by the weight of the pack that you're carrying, access to foods and fluids to top up. So it's really individual for everybody and what we're doing.
Well, let's jump into the sports food. I often call this science food. So if you hear me call it science food, that is just me. So the sports food, I stand at REI here in the US and I'm like, holy cow, that's a lot of options. So I love that you broke it down into a handful of categories, because it makes that section, when you're shopping online or you're at a store, it makes it a little bit easier to consume. What are your different categories that you have for sports products, and what are some of your favorite ones?
The actual options that I've listed are the most popular options that I find with athletes, clients, when I'm working with them. So when it comes to the use of sports products and fuels, it is individual, because some people just really just want to rely on sports products for moving time. They find that they go down well, they're easier, they're lighter. that's just something they're used to doing. Some people want a mix of real foods in there as well. So again, as I keep repeating myself, it depends on the style of the day. The other time really to use the sports products would be if we're moving higher up the mountain, if we're trying to do kind of a fast and light approach. Again, if we're moving through terrain that maybe we need to move through quickly because of technical or the safety aspect, then sports products become the go-to thing to use. But again, they're strategically put in through the day. The most popular ones I've seen that are used are things like the gels, so the honey stinger gels. Spring gels are quite good because they're more real food, so they're quite popular. Spring gels. The other ones I didn't list, the Morton. I put the Morton drink, but Morton gels, because they're flavorless. So actually they can be something that can be used to go down if we're struggling with appetite, because they don't have much of a flavor and it's just a case of squirting and going down and maybe practicing that. So again, sports waffles are probably one of the number one popular ones because they're just a nice size. They tend to be broken down easily. They tend to withstand the cold. Sports drinks, like I said, are a great option. These are, again, the most popular ones. Tailwinds, Cis Beta Fuel, they're higher in carbohydrates and calories, Scratch and Morton. Choose and Blocks, sports bars, and these tend to be the common ones, but there are so many options out there these days. Just have a look and try or stick to the ones you're already using. And then protein options. I know, probably jumping ahead, but there was a question that we had from someone is how to get more protein in the day. Most of the bars, the sports bars these days, do a protein version, so add more protein in, which is great. You can use some gels. You can get recovery gels with protein in that you can use as part of your carbohydrate and energy intake for moving time. Recovery shakes, like I suggested, Tailwind here that you can see in the picture is often a popular one. Scratch do a really good tasting one as well. I'm not affiliated to any of these people. They're just good options and most popular with everyone. And you can also use protein powders, or we're kind of going a bit more technical, but there's protein powders that you can add to your water, that a bit like protein water. You can also get potentially branched chain amino acids. The research shows they're not very good for use for day to day in terms of if we're eating enough protein, but they can be beneficial if we're going away on a trip where we know protein intakes are going to be down. You can take branched chain amino acids tablets probably every 4 hours roughly to really keep protein levels topped up. Don't take the powder because it really doesn't taste very nice, and you want to be able to make sure that you can drink all the fluid that you've got. So there's just different options there. I think we had another question at what to eat if we're doing Everest, Denali, particularly Everest and these higher altitudes. At times that one snack per hour of moving time isn't going to work. If you're moving through the Khumbu Icefall, if you're going through the Western Cwm, certainly if you're getting up to Camp 4 and summiting, the chances of actually eating anything, maybe the Khumbu Icefall, if you're queuing to try and climb the ice wall, maybe you'll have an opportunity to take something if it's here. That will probably be a gel or a chew because it's easy. Maybe grab a drink. But if you're doing a summit bid, the idea is that potentially you're not really going to be able to have an opportunity to eat anything on Everest. So the idea would be to eat and drink as well as you can at camp. And if you can manage it at any point, taking a gel or a chew, but really practicing that in training, everything with gloves on or your kit on. So again, your nutrition strategy will change at altitude, but then also depending on the mountain that you're going up. Everest, I think, is the toughest. And I haven't mentioned it, but fitness really is something that's going to save you energy. Being fit for your objective, so the aerobic fitness, is really going to help save you energy, because if you are moving through the mountains or through your trip or your day where it's just not safe to eat, or you run out of food and you just have another couple of hours to go, that's when your aerobic fitness is really going to kick in and support you. Because I know someone's asked the question on this, but if you're well trained aerobically, your zone 1 low intensity exercise, you've gone out and you're doing that, then that will actually help you to use more fat as a fuel source within your body. So if you're aerobically fit, you're going to be a bit more fuel efficient or metabolically efficient. So your body's able to tap into fat as a fuel source within the body, and you supplement it with carbohydrates. So you'll find that you'll be able to move further for longer, potentially having to eat less. I'm not saying you don't eat, but that's how you can optimize your nutrition strategy. So for those times where you just can't do it, That's when your fitness is going to kick in. And the same with strength. If you're strong, you're going to have power and the energy to move over this technical ground to then be able to carry the equipment and the weight that you have in your pack. And that's going to save you energy. If you're less fit, or if you're not potentially fit at all, then it's going to be harder. Thinking about just as we start training, everything feels really hard. And if you're moving over technical ground and you're not as fit or as strong as somebody else, it's going to cost you more energy. It's going to be harder for you. So then in these instances, when you go into the mountains, we do these big days. I really place a lot of emphasis on aerobic fitness and doing the strength training that's relative to your objective, and that's going to help you save energy and help you optimize your nutrition strategy.
Rebecca, thank you for all that information and really helping us understand how to plan, how to prepare, and how to manage, especially those big days where you're summiting on the final pushes or standing in the Kubu Icefall where you're making a little bit more high-risk moves while you're out there. If you want to work with Rebecca, here is her contact information. Rebecca, what do you have to say about your discovery call?
Yeah, it's a no-fee discovery call where I just chat through your goal, I explain about my nutrition services. I can answer any of your questions. The way I work with people is really easy to implement nutrition strategies, building on what you're already doing well, and then fitting it in with your diet preferences and your likes and dislikes and your lifestyle. I really work hard to try and make sure that the nutrition advice is really usable and practical and actionable for you and is long lasting so that you have your takeaway with you. And I always say to my athletes, if I do my job properly, you shouldn't need me after. It's just really empowering everybody with the tools and the know-hows and the resources to then go away and then get the most out of your day-to-day in your training, help develop a nutrition strategy for your main objective, and then off you go, and hopefully then you'll be skilled enough to not need me.
So Rebecca, I want to jump in here. A couple of people asked about being diabetic in the mountains, and I know that's very specific, and I know we're also teetering into medical advice there. So I wanted to give you a chance, just looking for advice or tips, or if you work with anyone that's diabetic.
Yeah, I work with people with diabetes. It's really individual and really difficult to give any specific information, and I would always start with what the athlete is doing themselves. Often we know what, in terms of managing our diabetes control, blood sugar control, we know really what works for us. I would work closely with that person to understand what was their past experience going into mountaineering, what's their past experience of blood glucose control during exercising, what's their current nutritional intake, and then maybe walking through an understanding that when we do go into altitude, people with diabetes can experience some insulin resistance. So I'd potentially encourage, at all times wearing blood glucose monitor if that's possible, a continuous blood glucose monitor if they don't already. But that's as far as I will go, because it is a medical thing, and depending on the insulin doses throughout the day, whether they're on a pump or as injections, there's quite a lot of other aspects that interplay there that come into the nutrition strategy. But I still, it's a similar approach, fueling regularly with carbohydrate whilst managing blood sugars and making sure the food is there, the carbohydrate is there available, making a backup strategy for any hypos or hyperglycemia. But, I would do that together with the person and certainly not just tell people what to do.
That makes sense. So, folks, if you have a really specific medical condition, working with your doctor and working with Rebecca will be helpful to make sure everyone's in lockstep together, is what I'm hearing, to support a climber like that. Now, another question came in from Raphael that I want to answer or have you chat about a little bit. It's talking about, do you recommend getting a metabolic test to see how your metabolism works, to see what nutrition strategy is the best for you? Is that something you recommend or your athletes have done before?
I work with athletes that have physiological testing, different types of physiological fitness testing. Depends on what we're talking about, but if it's looking at metabolism, understanding resting metabolic rate, energy needs, but then also looking at fuel utilization, fat oxidation, carbohydrate utilization, it's not imperative. It certainly can be interesting and helpful to go into a bit more detail and personalize someone's nutrition strategy, but I would still start with the basics first. Make sure day-to-day training, nutrition for the objective is well planned and practiced and carried out. And then maybe if someone wants to go in deeper, fantastic. We can use that information to further personalize the nutrition guidance.
And then I want to ask one more question from Rajat about protein to carbohydrate ratio in the meals while at altitude. Rajat, I'm not sure how high in altitude you're talking, but he asked what's the protein to carbohydrate ratio in the meals we should focus on in the high altitude for a 2-week expedition?
Yeah, good question. I would have to understand where you're going, self-supported, not supported, where you're getting your meal from, freeze-dried meals, refuge, tea huts, what accommodation you are getting it from. But really what you want to do is, because you're going into the mountains, calories are king. So the idea is when you're off the mountain and you want to refuel, primarily you're looking at carbohydrate based and then adding some protein. In terms of the protein in grams, percentages are a bit meaningless because it doesn't really tell us how much or the quantity. So I'd suggest between 1.5 to 2 grams of, well, maybe more, 2 to 4 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight, if that's possible to get that amount in terms of the recovery meal. And then you're looking around at least, if you can, 20 grams of protein per meal, minimum 10 grams. That's where you can start as a starting place.
Rebecca, I'm going to jump into a few more questions left over from the registrants as well. So Paul asked a great question. Do you recommend any specific foods to help with cramping? Either preventing a cramp or, oh no, I've got a cramp.
Yeah, so I've had some people who take mustard sachets. If they have experienced cramps up in the mountain, mustard sachets, the vinegar or the pickle can actually help alleviate cramps. Magnesium can be another one that can help alleviate cramps. Making sure you're hydrated, so rehydrating well at the end of the day, making sure you start every day hydrated will go a long way to offsetting cramps. Adding in an electrolyte, sodium may offset the cramping, potentially more so in heat than anywhere else. A magnesium supplement might help, but again, cramping can come from, if we're doing our trip, our day, often we're moving quicker than we might be when we're doing training, or we're just kind of moving around at lower levels just on a day-to-day basis. So sometimes the cramping can come from the equipment or the style of movement that we're doing. We've got crampons on, if we're climbing up ice faces, we're often using our calves that we're not used to using as much, and so that can lead to cramping. So fatigue in the muscles is often more so the primary cause of the cramping, just tiredness because we're not used to using them in that way or that much or at that intensity for so long. So it's a variability of things that we can address. But yeah, mustard sachets, pickled juice, magnesium, staying well hydrated or rehydrating and adding a sodium supplement, but try one at a time and maybe not try them all at once.
Yeah, really helpful tips there for that. Never really thought about the mustard.
Actually, I can't claim that as my own, but it's a great tip if you can manage the flavor. Don't do it if it's going to make you sick and put you off your food at altitude.
I know some people from the state of Wisconsin here would love that idea. They love mustard a whole lot. And so one more question that I had from Belinda, and it's a very honest question that I think is great. So you have a full-time job, you're now training for a mountaineering trip, and now you're like, oh heavens, I have to start adding in a nutrition plan. Any suggestions for how to balance this, prepping for a big expedition like this? Because you start to add on little things to your plate and you already have your regular life to manage as well. So do you have any advice for folks that are managing lots of spinning plates?
I would say you need some help. We can't do it all on our own. That's where I come in with a lot of my athletes, clients, is that it's really difficult to do it on their own. When I work with clients on an individual basis, I produce the spreadsheet, I fill it all in, I do it for everyone. Basically what people need to do is order it and test it or order it and put it together. I appreciate it's quite a onerous task, but once you've done it once you've practiced it and you've got it sussed, you've got it so I appreciate. And that's why it inspires me to work with people that are on this webinar, because we've got a family, we're trying to work full-time jobs, we're trying to train and go on these big objectives. So there's so much time, energy and preparation that goes into it. But if you can find any time just to sit and scribble some notes and come up with a rough draft of what you need for this trip and practice it until you're confident with it. Use your long hikes, long training sessions to do that might make it a bit easier. Then once you've done it, you've got it. But I appreciate it does feel onerous in the beginning, but it is worth trying to find the time if you can.
And then I saved one final question from Kevin, because I know you know him and it's a fun question. It's kind of a bit silly. So I'll just read it as Kevin wrote it. My evil coach, Mark Postel of Folk Endurance, who we work with and love very much, has programmed 4x4 sprints for me this afternoon. What's the best nutrition advice today for Kevin to help him prep energy-wise? And how far in advance should he eat today?
Yeah, have a pre-training snack. Have your main meal 2 to 3 hours before. Make sure it's got plenty of carbohydrate. Maybe it's potatoes, rice, pasta, bread, something like that. Your usual carbohydrate portion. And then definitely 30 to 60 minutes before, have a carbohydrate snack. If you're used to it, I would probably suggest a gel. And depending on the time, I'd imagine that's probably a 60-minute or so duration session. So have a gel before it, take a sports drink. And if you can sip on a sports drink in the rest periods between the sprints and take a gel, another gel or chews or jelly sweets halfway through to get you through the rest of the session, there you go. So a pre-training snack, maybe a banana, 30, 60 minutes before if you're not used to a gel, and then maybe try a gel 15 minutes before the session, drink a sports drink during in the rest periods in between, and a gel or chews or sweets halfway through. But make sure it's easy to go down and sip, because I don't want you throwing up during that sprint session. Have a great session.
And that main meal you said was 2 to 3 hours beforehand, which I think is nice.
You need time to give it to digest and not be sat in your stomach. If it's too late and you've not had that and you're going into your session, definitely have an easy to digest carbohydrate snack. Rice cakes with jam on it, or nut butter, or dark chocolate rice cakes, or a slice of bread with jam, or a glass of milk, or a banana, something that's just going to be easy to digest and not sat in your stomach through that training session.
Well, folks, that wraps up all of our questions. Rebecca, I want to give you one more chance to suggest anything else or share anything else from the list of questions or knowledge you have.
Nutrition's a huge topic, so I hope that everybody's taken at least one thing away that you can use that's helpful for you today. And yeah, have an amazing time on all of your adventures.
Rebecca, on behalf of Climb the 7 Summits, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise and being our go-to nutrition, food, fuel in the mountains person. Really quite incredible. I'm going to leave the final thought with you before we sign off.
My final thought, firstly, thanks for having me. It's been fantastic to really share my knowledge with everybody and my practical nutrition suggestions. But yeah, my final thought is practice, practice, practice.
Yay! Folks, that's it today. Thank you all so much.